The cabinet announced that the second phase of going back to normalcy would begin on June 30th, Tuesday, with curfew hours shortened to 8 p.m. until 5 a.m. local time. In a press conference after the cabinet's exceptional meeting, the head of Government Communication Center, the government's official spokesman Tariq Al-Mizrim, said that a number of decisions were made as part of the second phase of returning back to normalcy. The decisions included appointing Health Minister Sheikh Dr. Bassel Sawah to continue assessing the health situation in the lockdown areas of Jalib al-Shuyukh, Mahboula and Farwaniya to better handle the situation and curb the spread of COVID-19. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo voiced hope for a resolution in the coming weeks with Sudan, which said it expects soon to be delisted as a state of sponsor of terrorism. Washington first blacklisted Sudan in 1993 as strongman Omar al-Bashir turned toward Islamists. Pompeo was speaking at the launch of an annual U.S. report on terrorism, which credited the new government's work with the United States and distancing from extremist groups. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said it's up to Israel to make its own decisions on whether to annex settlements in the occupied West Bank, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has voted to do despite international opposition. Speaking to reporters ahead of Netanyahu's July 1st target date, Pompeo said extending Israeli sovereignty was a decision for Israelis to make. Senior aides to U.S. President Donald Trump began discussions on Tuesday on whether to give Netanyahu the green light for annexation, which has drawn condemnation from the Palestinians, the Arab world, and a number of other foreign governments. Arab League chief Ahmed Abul-Gheit warned that Israel's annexation of parts of the West Bank will destroy any prospect for peace in the future. The possible move by the Israeli government to annex parts of the occupied Palestinian territory would constitute, if implemented, a serious threat to regional stability. He continued that annexation would endanger Middle East peace and could ignite a religious war in and beyond our region. France's foreign minister called on its European Union partners to hold urgent talks on the bloc's future relations with Turkey, which has clashed with Paris over its role in Libya. Ties between NATO allies France and Turkey have soared in recent weeks. Paris has criticized Turkey's military support for the government of national accord in Libya and its role in the Syria conflict. Turkey's drilling operations in the Eastern Mediterranean are also a point of contention. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that the Trump administration was imposing sanctions on 5 Iranian ship captains who had delivered oil to Venezuela. Pompeo also said the United States continues to support Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido, Washington, which seeks the ouster of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, and most other Western governments have recognized Guaido as the legitimate leader of the OPEC nation. The ship captain delivered approximately 1.5 million barrels of Iranian gasoline and related components to Venezuela in support of the Maduro regime, said the State Department. The International Monetary Fund has sharply lowered its forecast for global growth this year because it envisions far more severe economic damage from the coronavirus than it did just 2 months ago. The IMF predicts that the global economy will shrink 4.9% this year, significantly worse than the 3% drop it had estimated in the previous report in April. It would be the worst annual contraction since immediately after World War II. An Iranian official called for mask wearing to be made compulsory as the country reported its highest daily coronavirus death toll in more than 2.5 months. Iran reported its first COVID-19 cases on February 19th, and it has since struggled to contain the outbreak of the death toll that nears 10,000. It had refrained from imposing a mandatory lockdown on people to stop the virus spread, and the use of masks and protective equipment is optional in most areas. Iran's president warned that the UN nuclear watchdog risks losing its independence after it adopted a resolution urging access to two sites alleged to have hosted past nuclear activities. The Vienna-based International Atomic Energy Agency passed the resolution put forward by European states last week, calling on Iran to help clarify whether undeclared nuclear activities took place at the sites in the early 2000s. But the Islamic Republic says the IAEA's requests for access were based on allegations from its arch enemy Israel and had no legal basis. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps mobilized a large force on the border with the Iraqi Kurdistan region, threatening to attack bases of Kurdish opposition groups if they continue to pose a threat to Iran. Earlier, Iranian Revolutionary Guard announced it was conducting major maneuvers in the Mariwan region with the participation of ground and air forces, drones, and Iran's president warned that the UN nuclear watchdog risks losing its independence after it adopted a resolution urging access to two sites alleged to have hosted past nuclear activities. The Vienna-based International Atomic Energy Agency passed the resolution put forward by European states last week, calling on Iran to help clarify whether undeclared nuclear activities took place at the sites in the early 2000s. But the Islamic Republic says the IAEA's requests for access were based on allegations from its arch enemy Israel and had no legal basis. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps mobilized a large force on the border with the Iraqi Kurdistan region, threatening to attack bases of Kurdish opposition groups if they continue to pose a threat to Iran. Earlier, Iranian Revolutionary Guard announced it was conducting major maneuvers in the Mariwan region with the participation of ground and air forces, drones, and special task forces. Meanwhile, the leadership of the Eastern Kurdistan production units announced that Iran mobilized large forces on the border villages of Mariwan and established large military bases. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed hope that Israel will hear global calls and will not go ahead with annexation of parts of the West Bank, which would undermine a two-state solution to the decades-old Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The UN chief said in an interview with the Associated Press that the United Nations has been consistently conveying the message that annexation would be not only against international law, but it would be a major factor to destabilize the region. Ankara has upped tensions with Paris and arrested 4 Turkish nationals, one of whom had previously worked in the French consulate in Istanbul on charges of forming a spy cell for France. According to officials, Metin Ozdemir, a former employee of the French consulate's security service, told police he had gathered intelligence for the French intelligence service, the DGSE. The report says the suspects used fake ID cards purportedly belonging to agents of Turkey's national intelligence organization, MIT, and claimed that they were collecting information on IS and similar terrorist groups. The International Monetary Fund predicted the COVID-19 pandemic will have cost the global economy $12 trillion by the end of next year. The pandemic was a crisis like no other. The contraction in the global economy would be significantly worse than it previously thought, and recovery was uncertain. Global gross domestic product is expected to fall by 4.9% this year in what the fund called the Great Lockdown. The World Health Organization (WHO) welcomed Saudi Arabia's decision to greatly limit the number of Hajj pilgrims this year due to the coronavirus pandemic. The kingdom said that just 1,000 people who are already living in Saudi Arabia will be able to perform the pilgrimage. Last year, almost 2.5 million worshippers from around the world took part. The U.S. envoy to Saudi Arabia condemned the Iran-backed Houthi drone and missile attacks on the kingdom, which had set back opportunities for peace in Yemen. John Abizaid said that the launching of armed drones and ballistic missiles into Saudi Arabia, including one fired toward Riyadh, was counterproductive to efforts aimed at bringing the end to fighting in Yemen. The American ambassador praised the Saudi Air Defense Force for thwarting Tuesday's attacks, which drew worldwide condemnation. After a 90-day curfew, the Egyptian government has eased some of the precautionary measures it imposed to counter the outbreak of the novel coronavirus COVID-19. The government revealed a raft of new measures as part of its previously announced coexist with the virus plan. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli said that starting Saturday, June 27th, certain precautionary measures will be lifted, but stressed the need for the general public to remain vigilant.